Hey, gorgeous people. I am here for a special and exciting little video with my friend and colleague, Sarah Paasch, in honor of our recent webinar that we did talking about Saturn and Aries and all of the richness and weirdness of this 3-year transit. Sarah and I wanted to pop on and actually record some rising sign based horoscopes for each sign for Saturn and Aries. Now, if you know in advance that this 2-minute horoscope is not going to be good enough for you, rest assured, Sarah and I have you covered. We do have our webinar for sale, released as a digital product. You can buy that at the link pinned below in the description. But for now, sit back, relax, and take a listen at what Sarah and I think is coming down the pipeline for you between now and 2028.
Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about some of the key transits ahead. It's going to be a cute little 2-minute coverage for each rising sign. Of course, you can always just zoom ahead in that Aries way to your rising sign if you want to. But thanks for being here, and let's go ahead and dive in. We're starting with Taurus rising. As we go through each of the signs, we're going to alternate who starts the reading for that horoscope. And so to begin, Alexandra is actually going to kick us off with the Taurus rising.
All right, Taurus risings, you guys have had Uranus trucking through your first house, conjoining your ascendant, and whatever else is in your first house for the past 8-ish years. And as Sarah and I said in our webinar, Unlock 2025, which was all about this year, our little theme for the slice of life of Taurus was like, hey, the restaurant has been renovated and now it's open for business. So I really do see a lot of that coming through in what Saturn and Aries has to offer, particularly because Saturn's retrograde back into Pisces with Neptune for the last time. And then that Saturn Neptune conjunction happens in Aries in the 12th house. And that really feels to me like questioning, remembering the why, the excitement about life, the optimism, the hope. That is really what the 11th house is about. There's also some social stuff there, but that conjunction happening at 0 degrees Aries for me says a lot about the hidden stuff and the stuff in between all of the particles of your life. How well fed is it? How nourished is it? Are all of your particles on the same track about what you want out of life and out of the world? Now, Saturn's in its joy in the 12th house. So, Taurus risings, I would say just know that this is going to feel heavy. And as Sarah and I always say about Saturn, if you're not enjoying your Saturn transit, it's because you're resisting something somewhere. Like Saturn really doesn't want to keep saying no, no, no. So if you are feeling those themes of Saturn and its joy, isolation, loneliness, impossibility, take a look at where you can yield to Saturn and how you can work with Saturn. This is going to be an important transit for you in that regard. Sarah, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I think that Saturn going through the 12th house for Taurus has a lot to do with this labor of introspection that you're being invited to over the next 2.5, 3 years. Something that I want to point out is that while the 12th house is this place where we need to retreat and we need to isolate in some regard in order to do that self-reflective work, which Saturn loves to do, we also would note that Pluto's in Aquarius, right now in your 10th house, and Uranus is soon to enter Gemini, making that trine in your second house. And both of these planets are supporting Saturn in the 12th house. This tells me that the relationship and the effort and the structure that you build with that Saturn in the 12th house to do that inner work. And I think in that Aries shadow way is like maybe there's something there, some hidden belief around I have to do everything myself, or I'll be judged for the ideas that I have in this unique inspiration or vision. The more that you're able to unravel and do that work and really build a new foundation within yourself and your psyche, the more that the career places in your chart can really light up and it feels very synergistic. The inner work is feeding the career and the success and your ability to be more visible in that area of your life.
Totally. That actually also makes me think of the fact that Jupiter will be moving from Cancer into Leo over the next couple years. And this year we have that beautiful grand air trine that happens during Libra season. It morphs into a grand water trine during Scorpio season. And that stuff is really gonna also move into a fire trine when Jupiter kind of comes into Leo. So all of this is lighting up for you, Tauruses, not just the career houses, as Sarah mentioned, but also there's a sense of grounding down and in. The water trines will be aspecting your 11th house. So again, we have these questions of optimism and hope and good spirit in the 11th house that are being supported by other transits that are happening. But Jupiter moving from your third to your fourth house during this Saturn and Aries experience tells me that you might find a lot of hope and a lot of possibility in your immediate environment and even in your home, your family, your neighborhood, and your daily rituals that really support your physical and mental health. All right. We've already spent too long on Taurus rising, so we're going to move to Gemini risings.
All right, Gemini risings. So this Saturn in Aries is happening for you in the 11th house. The 11th house has to do with the place of our hopes and beliefs, our visions for the future, those big goals that we have, those big dreams. It also has to do with our allies, our networks and communities and friends who really cheer us on and bring us forward and support our dreams, bringing them into form and reality. For you, this is going to be about really finding a place in a community where you feel supported, a container that really allows a new form of leadership in that Saturnian way to take shape and to take form. And so you might be asked to step up in a place of taking on responsibility when it comes to your groups and your connections. It might be an opportunity for you to also do some boundary work around anybody that you have in that 11th house that actually is not feeding your hopes and your dreams for the future, your ambitions. I also want to just quickly mention that right now we've got Pluto in Aquarius, and soon Uranus will enter into Gemini, making these places in your chart, your ninth house and your first house, really supporting and synergizing whatever work you're doing in that 11th house Saturn and Aries transit. And so there's also some exciting, potentially new ventures and journeys that you get to go on as you continue to do the Saturn work of consolidating who are the people that I'm bringing with me as I go forward.
Totally. I think there's a risk with Saturn and Aries for everyone of feeling a little bit too much like an outsider. And that is really true for you, Geminis, because as Uranus comes through your first house, you might be feeling a little bit like a crazed inventor, like a tinkerer with frazzled hair, like at your workbench making all kinds of magical stuff. You might be feeling really isolated from your friends, or like they really don't understand you, like the social systems that you've built just don't speak to who you're becoming in a sudden and unexpected and really fast paced way. But there is some lightning in a bottle to be seized here. And there really is a lot of that grand trine energy that we talked about, especially during Libra season, will have you feeling way more creative than you might have previously been feeling with Saturn, Jupiter squaring each other across the mutable signs, and a lot of the stuckness that has been happening since 2024 will melt away. Just make sure that as you're developing and maturing into some brand new bitch, that you don't forget that your friends are there and they have your back, and that even if it doesn't feel like they understand you, you're going to be able to get in and talk to them. Cancer risings. I know this is about Saturn and Aries, but I'm just so excited. All my little Cancer rising babies are going to get to experience Jupiter coming into your first house. And I think that that actually is going to be extremely empowering and help offset the feelings that other people might have with Saturn and Aries. Now, we mentioned the square from Saturn in Pisces to Jupiter in Gemini, but this square that's forming this year between Saturn in Aries and Jupiter in Cancer is actually super, super favorable for you. Jupiter in Cancer is exalted and very strong. Saturn in Aries is pretty weak. I would say that this moment with Saturn and Aries is a time for you to strengthen and mature and strike out and step into whatever role of eminence and leadership you have always wanted to occupy, even and especially if there aren't words to talk about it yet, even and especially if you haven't seen other people do it yet. And another challenge, I think, for Cancer risings, particularly, is going to be finding really healthy forms of self authority. So, no longer relying on others to kind of validate your experiences or dreams or goals or memories, but actually finding a really healthy form of authority in yourself.
Yeah, I love what you said about the eminence and the striking out, and especially if it hasn't been done before. I think that Saturn in Aries for you, Cancer rising, is a huge call It's answering the call. It is asking you to come out into visibility, to share and really stand with authority, speaking your place of leadership and whatever place and shape that form takes. With Jupiter coming into your first house, it's going to uplift and it's also going to push you out into the world in new and expansive ways. And this Saturn and Aries, especially in the beginning, that square might feel like, where do I feel contraction? Where do I feel fear and hold myself back from saying yes to the call of leadership? And where can I develop and maybe invest in some skills, that I will help me to feel more confident in holding that seat of leadership? If there's anything that you've been working on career-wise, this Saturn in Aries is a great opportunity for you to put it out into the world, to take any creative projects into their next stage of development, to take the risk of sharing them with others and into the world, and to be okay with maybe stepping in and putting on a new hat to be recognized by the public for what it is that you're here to share and create. All right, so Leo risings. I just want to say that Leos, you have no shortage of invitations for being called forward with the upcoming astrology and all of the changes happening collectively. Saturn in your ninth house is going to bring this reality check when it comes to your worldviews and your beliefs. With Saturn in Aries, at its worst in the ninth house, could be becoming a dogmatic, oppressive figure of belief and leadership. And I feel that Saturn and Aries in your ninth can be this opportunity for you to do some really helpful reflection within yourself around these worldviews and around these beliefs and the ways in which you embody and enact the integrity of those in your own life. We know that Pluto is in Aquarius in your seventh house. It's going to be there sitting across from you for the next 20 years. And so you're going through this long-term evolutionary process of what it is to be in relationship with others and to hold this mirror that your partners are reflecting back to you of the I am. And so it's not only the I am, but it is the I am, I believe, and I enact in this way.
Beautiful. Yeah, two keywords that are coming up for me for Leo risings is like sovereignty and visibility. Like there have been some major renovations with Uranus in Taurus moving through your 10th house. Now it's leaving, and you get to actually experiment with how you want to be seen and how you want to step out as a person with self authority and that sense of sovereignty. How are you going to want to be visible? There is going to be pressure, to Sarah's point, on that from the ninth house, the joy of your chart ruler, the sun, and from that place of natural rulership and consideration of others. There's something very social happening here as well, because eclipses will be happening in your first and seventh houses. So it is up to you guys, Leo risings, to decide how you want to relate to other people and additionally how you want to be seen by them, because it is two separate issues. So that's something for Leo risings to think about, how you want to connect with people versus how you want to sort of be regarded by them in those moments where, as to Sarah's point, like your integrity is speaking rather than you literally speaking. When you leave the room, what does your integrity have to say about you?
Mm, put that on a t-shirt. I love that.
Virgo risings. If you've ever looked yourself in the mirror and thought, when am I going to stop toxically people pleasing? The answer is right now, this transit, Saturn and Aries coming through your eighth house, the place of those sticky soul contracts, the place of thankless giving to other people, feeling entangled and indebted, feeling that ancestral pull of the weight of the choices that people have made generations before us. Saturn coming through Aries is your chance to say, I'm not like you. I'm not doing things the way that you did them, and use some of those more difficult connotations that Saturn brings to Aries, which is feeling like a maverick, feeling like a rule breaker, feeling different from others. Those things are all really going to help you in your eighth house. And the Saturn Neptune conjunction that happens in February, while there are eclipses happening in Virgo and Pisces still, it's just a huge and strong and powerful opportunity for you to decide that you are going to start setting boundaries. And something important, I think, for Virgo risings to note is like, it doesn't matter if you've never set them before. It doesn't matter if you've never set a boundary before, and it doesn't matter if this is a new version of you. You don't have to answer to anyone for that. So, those are some of the more helpful connotations that I think Saturn is bringing to Aries. The Saturn Jupiter square across the mutable signs also was creating something of a T square with the Virgo ascendant, if not elsewhere mutable in the chart, potentially even like a grand cross over the past year. So, a lot of feelings around stuckness, being stuck in relationships or stuck being seen in ways by our family and our communities and others around us that we really don't want to be looked at. Those things are falling away, and you have a real opportunity in this transit to say, enough. I am not that person anymore. I am my own bitch.
Wow, yeah, I'm feeling empowered and I'm not a Virgo rising. I love this. I think the entanglements and exchanges of collaborations becomes a big theme for the Saturn and Aries work for Virgo rising. Virgos, you have the opportunity to create an entirely new standard of contract when it comes to coming into partnership with other people and exchanging resources. Some of that shadow side that Saturn and Aries might help you work out in that eighth house. Are there any fears about leaning on other people around asking for help or getting resourced and support from other people and their resources? If there's any past potential trauma or pain in those memories, is this the moment where Saturn can help you sever and release them so that you can welcome a new story here with this new standard? And if it's people pleasing, that's another thing, right? So that's still an imbalance in those contracts and exchanges. And Saturn's going to help you get real with yourself around what it is you have been asking or haven't been asking. That now, if you really want to go to the next level, you're going to have to sort that out. You're going to have to name that and have a constructive way to ask for it and to receive it. I think that with Pluto and Aquarius in your sixth house and Uranus soon to move into Gemini in your 10th house, it feels like as you really contend and say yes to the Saturnian lessons around these exchanges in your eighth house and maybe those fears that you might have or anxieties, there's going to be a lot of momentum and growth that can happen with your work and with your career or in relationship with your colleagues. So this could be like, I finally know how to ask for help because I finally know how to own my own strengths without feeling like that's a weakness to not be perfect on every level, right? Virgo rising. So I'm excited to see what happens with your work and the collaborations that come in to resource you and help lift you up in that way too. Okay, Libra risings. I'll try not to be too biased since I myself am a Libra rising. Saturn is now in the seventh house. So Saturn in Aries is angular, which means that Saturn is going to be a lot more prominent in the conversations that he's having with you. And in the seventh house, this is really your invitation to confront any relationship or partnership and commitment patterns that need some development or maturation. If there's anything that's happening in your partnerships and relationships where there needs to be an implementation of stronger, healthier boundaries, Saturn's going to help you do that and execute that. If there's anywhere where you're being called to show up with integrity to the things and the people that you say, yes, I am committed to. There might be a form and a lesson around sacrifice and compromise and a maturation of your relationship within those realms. I also think that with Pluto and Aquarius in your fifth and Uranus soon to move into Gemini in your ninth, in those supportive sextiles to Saturn in the seventh, feels like there's this a lot of collaborative, creative energy really supporting you. And so if you're ever feeling challenged with this Saturn and Aries, to not be afraid to ask and lean on your resources of the people who see you and love you for the weirdo that you are, that remind you of the exciting journey that you have ahead and kind of help you reframe your challenges into kind of like the thing that's actually pushing you forward, like a challenge that's something to competitively Mars get over and like win. That's something I can really see those things helping us with.
Yeah, Libra risings, to have Jupiter coming through your 10th house, I feel like there's going to be new opportunities for you to step into those roles of visibility and leadership and eminence as well. And the interesting part about that is that there's a sense that you are going to have to answer to whom you feel passionately about collaborating with and empowering with all of that new power in your 10th house. There's a social question that's going on here. And it's almost like the opportunity is going to precede the purpose. You're going to have all of this opportunity, but it's going to feel hollow. And you're almost going to have to like develop that purpose underneath it and like figure out how to infuse everything you're doing with meaning, particularly at the risk of like some kind of burnout or potentially alienating people around you because of this sort of like ambitious stuff that might be going on. Okay, Scorpio risings, you're in kind of a unique position because your ruler, Mars, also rules your sixth house of Aries. And so there's something mutual here about what's going on in your sixth house and what's going on with Mars ruling Saturn and Aries and your life and yourself. And Mars is your chart ruler. So there's something here with your body. And I want to encourage you during this transit to make sure that you're taking physical care of yourself, schedule those doctor's appointments, and take care of your physical body. This would be a great time if you were wanting to do any sort of physical practice, like starting to get really into breath work or yoga or some of the more martial physical activities like martial arts or lifting weights. Things like that might be really good ways, Scorpios, to not just mitigate the sort of martial turmoil that Saturn is going to be activating in Aries, the sign of its fall. But it may also be an interesting and supportive way to spur on the really beautiful stuff that's happening in the watery signs and houses, and then in the fiery signs and houses over the next couple of years. So, getting your creative juices going. How can you spur your Mars into action and then harness that Mars to create things that mean something to you and that help feed your spiritual reality and that really help nurture your inner fire?
Yeah, I love where you went with that. I love that you pointed out that this is not just a Saturn and Aries in the sixth house for Scorpio rising. Scorpio risings, this is a deeply personal transit to you. It's going to feel like that most likely. And so it's going to be a reckoning of, I see it as burnout. And it's really going to bring up any of the
Mm,
ways that you've self-sacrificed in the sense that you've not acknowledged the limitations, these self-limitations of your own physical body when it comes to your day-to-day commitments and lifestyles and routines with that sixth house. Saturn's going to help you confront and give you a reality check to say if you've been overgiving in other areas of your life or in relationships, this is going to feel like no longer. You can no longer do this. And the benefit of that, which I see with the Pluto and Aquarius in the fourth, and then Uranus soon to move into Gemini in the eighth, is there can be a liberation of unhealthy contracts and exchanges with other people. So if you're willing to say yes to Saturn, to say, I'm willing to admit where I've been overgiving, where I have not acknowledged and put myself first and my needs first, and do the hard work of starting to assert those no's and take myself seriously, my needs seriously, you'll start to disarm or dismantle any unconscious or, just limiting beliefs around it not being safe to do so in your partnerships or at home. So I think there's a deep level of like safety and security and a healing that can happen around that at the root for Scorpio risings that's going to happen through action and consistency with that Saturn and Aries over time. And I just want to remind everybody that everybody benefits when we take care of ourselves, when we actually honor those limitations and we fill ourselves first. Then when we give to others, we're giving from that really genuine place. So Sagittarius rising, we're talking about Saturn and Aries in your fifth house. This 2.5 year transit is about you starting to take your creative passions seriously. I know that Sagittarius is love to have fun, love to go on adventures, love to explore, and Saturn wants you to take fun more seriously. It might feel at first like there's a lack of creative energy or a lack of joy in your life. And the way that I really see Saturn moving through the fifth house is it's asking you to mature your relationship to your creativity and to your joy. So if you're going to take it more seriously, how can you bring a discipline into your creative life, into your joy? How can you structure and schedule that into your life in a way that shows the creative parts of you that you're serious about them. You are the caretaker. You're going to actually see and them develop all the way through that creative life versus maybe getting bored and moving on to the next thing. I think that with Pluto in Aquarius in your third house and Uranus soon to move into your seventh house, this is going to help and synergize this Saturn and Aries transit to help you really have a reality check around what actually is my definition of fun and who and where am I resourcing that for myself. This will help you tap into new resources, meet new people, have new introductions. And so I'm excited to see what you guys create with this for yourselves and the potential of maybe where that will be gifted back to the world in the future at the end, towards the end of this transit.
Totally. That sense of stuckness that has been happening for the mutable risings and for Sagittarius risings in particular, who like expansion and travel and novelty and growing their mind and their body and their sphere, to have had Saturn in the fourth house grounding you down and in, locking you into place, creating restrictions all over your chart, with Jupiter in detriment in Gemini, creating these kind of confusing interpersonal relationships and maybe a proliferation of them, maybe a lot of them, but not a lot of meaningful ones or ones that could really kind of be as weighty and deep as Sagittarius likes to go. So now that those planets are shifting, it's almost like there's going to be a newfound freedom, but that freedom doesn't mean the same thing it used to mean. We have to
Mm.
honor the fact that you've been through what you've been through, not just in the past 3 years, but in your life. And so there really is this inherent sense of maturation around what actually is fun to you anymore. Now that you have grounded down and into your fourth house for the last 3 years with Saturn and Neptune, probably in ways that aren't even totally possible to understand, it's like, okay, what are you going to do with your newfound freedom? And is it going to feel as good? And to Sarah's point, I think developing your ideas, getting serious about fun, but developing your ideas around what brings you joy is actually going to be the most meaningful way to use this transit.
Yeah, I just have to make one more plug for this fifth house is like if there's any unhealthy use of simulating joy in your life or pleasure, like it could be a substance, it could be an unhealthy relationship, anything like that, Saturn in Aries is going to help you to release that, to sever that, to create an ending and to develop something that is more real and sustainable and life-giving. And it might be a change in environment and relationship with those outer planet transits activating the third and seventh.
All
Okay.
right, Cap Risings. Let's go. Let's go be exiles. That's what's happening here in our fourth house. We're going to exile ourselves in some material way. Now, whether that's from a toxic family lineage, whether that's from a living place that doesn't make you happy, a series of roommates that are holding you back. This is the opening Saturn square for the Capricorn rising. It is a time for striking out and making a bold move that is in a self declared way, not like what has come before it. It's time to find that self authority. You know yourself, you do the work, you develop yourself. You're listening to astrology podcasts for fun, you're journaling, you're looking inside. It's time to trust yourself and to strike out on your own. Now, Saturn, as always, is a leap and the net will appear type planet. In our glorious Saturn and Aries webinar, Sarah and I dug up this Stephen Forrest quote that I'm going to butcher right now, but he says basically, we think of Jupiter as this planet of faith, but Jupiter gives us faith by giving us crutches, by saying, here's a lot of sex, here's a hot car, here's some money. Don't you have faith in the universe trying to support you and provide for you? In reality, Forrest argues we should think about Saturn as the planet of faith because Saturn actually strips away all of our crutches and says, here, what kind of faith do you have right now where you have nothing and no one? And let me tell you, I read that quote not realizing how much it just applied to me. And I'm going to have to take some notes after we wrap up recording. But this is a time for Cap Risings to strike out on their own and to decide no longer, we are not like you.
Hmm. Yeah, this is definitely a confrontation, a reality check that cannot be avoided around anything that's not truly life-giving from the ground up. So whether it's a living situation, it's family dynamics or family interactions or legacies, Saturn in Aries is going to really ask you to be the one to take ownership of what you call home and what you call foundational and what you say is mine to create safety and security. And so, to Alex's point, this transit is going to be a 3-year journey of establishing a new relationship to safety and security and building that and investing yourself into really creating that and cultivating that. I think that this is also going to be really supported with that Jupiter moving into Cancer in your seventh house. Capricorn risings tend to be the quintessential providers, right? From the very beginning, they have always been the ones that, if not only just responsible for themselves, they've been responsible and known how to do that for everybody else around them, the person everybody goes to, because they always feel so solid and stoic. And I feel like Jupiter coming into your Cancer seventh house is this invitation for you to melt into the arms of somebody else, for you to say, I really am the one who needs the hug today. And that really is, if it is uncomfortable, if it's bringing things up for you, Jupiter's helping you to heal that. And how does that nourish and sustain the new foundation or idea of home that Saturn and Aries wants you to really devote yourself and have faith in that you can create? Aquarius rising, we cannot ignore the fact that Pluto is in your first house, and this is a huge component of the influence of Saturn and Aries and what you're going to do and work with Saturn and Aries. When I see Saturn and Aries in the third house, I think of mental fortitude. I think of the limited amount of hours and energy that we have to use in every single day of our lives. And I feel as though Saturn in Aries in your third house is going to ask you to get real about your commitments, about how you're expending your energy and your time, and also your mental fortitude. So there might feel like you have this sense of Pluto and Aquarius in your first house, like I'm suddenly feeling like I have to do so much more or stand into roles of leadership and power that I didn't necessarily ask for. And in doing so, how is that confronting those third house topics of your day-to-day routines and schedules and commitments? How is it confronting your communication patterns with that third house? Do you need to develop new skills around communication when it comes to working with other people or maybe even in the career? This is going to be an opportunity for you to use Saturn to create better structure and boundaries so that you can have a discipline of your own time and energy and be even more respected and empowered to step into that Plutonic leadership and role of change maker that's really coming for you.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think Pluto in the first house is clearly the headline here. But with Jupiter coming through your sixth and through your seventh, and then Saturn coming into Aries in the third, this is really making me think about how exhausting the process of personal transformation really is. Like we sit here and we think, oh, I'll just develop better habits. Oh, I'll just undo generational trauma. I'll just go to therapy. It's like absolutely exhausting work. So Saturn in the third to me is like the lesson of true isolation and true rest, but actually like not the kind that is inflicted upon us, but the kind that is chosen by us and opted into. Like Saturn coming through your third wants you to rest when you need it, not when you feel you can allow it. When you
Mm.
truly actually need it. There's this like TikTok everybody sends around where someone says that their therapist tells them, hey, it's not you being lazy. Because if you were being lazy, you would be enjoying yourself instead of feeling guilty and hating yourself. So, if you are the kind of person who's relaxing while hating themselves for relaxing, this Saturn in the third is going to be really powerful opportunity for you to learn how to actually relax and enjoy yourself because the messy, disgusting, rotten bodies in the cold, hard earth of Pluto coming through your first house is going to be taking up a lot more energy than you think.
Oh, wow. I love that. So dark and
Mic drop.
descriptive. Pluto is very impressed. Very, very. Yeah, and also like with that, acknowledging in that Saturnian way of taking ownership of your resentments and your burnouts. You are the person who is responsible for being in this position, and you are the person who is responsible for setting different parameters around your commitments, your time, and your energy. So it'll be fruitful. Don't waste this Saturn and Aries. Aquarius rising is going to help that Pluto out.
Pisces risings, really the main headline story of Saturn moving into Aries for you is Saturn getting out of your first house. So, Saturn on the angles and in the first house brings those Saturnian lessons and those preferred Saturnian tools of isolation, restriction, hard work, hard growth right into the first house. And Saturn leaving your first house is going to feel incredible. It's going to feel like a weight lifted off your body. But in that moment, I want you to think about how much stronger you've grown since Saturn entered your first house. You have been doing like heavy deadlifts or maybe really heavy bench presses for 3 years. And so the moment that weight lifts, I want you to first just take a minute and to think about how much stronger you've grown and to celebrate yourself and your progress there. Now, what Saturn and Neptune are doing in your second house is creating a new era with that conjunction around your resources. And that is not just financial resources, but that may possibly be part of it. But things like time and energy are finite resources. And this transit is going to say, okay, now you're really, really strong and you've done all this work. Where are you going to allocate your resources to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? As with all of the other mutable signs, there is also a sense of stuckness over the past year that is falling away. And Jupiter entering your fifth house is going to bring an influx of really beautiful lunar creative energy. Now, if you are trying to start a family of some kind, Jupiter may also be bringing that in your fifth house. And I think that's actually just a really good metaphor or analogy or thing to consider when we're thinking about how precious resources can be. So think about having a newborn baby or a newborn creative project or writing a book, whatever it may be. Your time and your energy become just as precious, if not more so, than your money.
Mm. Yeah, I also wanted to tie in the fact that Saturn has just completed or is completing this year that first house transit. And so, perfectly, as it moves into your second house, Pisces rising, this is now the moment where you really acknowledge and you really own the work that you've done with Saturn in the first house. What and who have you been shaped into? How have you owned a new level of authority? And in what ways? Is Saturn now in the second house asking you to take that seriously as an asset and a resource? This might feel like you have to do some of that work around what's stopping me or how am I devaluing the things that I have to offer. And so the second house is this place that stores our assets. And it can be money on one hand, but it can also be the things that we have, like our gifts, our talents. And so this can be an investment into those things for yourself and a complete up leveling, right? Into saying, I have something of great value to offer, and I'm going to give myself permission to actually own that and put that out there so that I can get a really regenerative exchange with the world. I also think that with that Aries second house, there might be some opportunity for you to say, I don't have to do all of this on my own. I can actually look to other people to help me and resource me and lift me up and kind of paying attention to the people around you who want to help. And maybe you haven't been totally awake or aware to receiving that. I feel like Saturn and Aries might help you do some of that work as well. And then, of course, on a very practical level, Saturn and Aries in your second house is like if you want to make a certain level of income, if you have these big goals, how can you break them down and really make them something that is sustainable, workable, practical, especially when you get those trines with Jupiter going into Leo and we're going to have Mars there. Later in the Saturn and Aries transit, there's going to be this boost of work that's going to be supporting and resourcing you to really make the most of that. Aries, all right, so this is very obviously a very important transit for you. Saturn in Aries in your first house is now saying, okay, you're ready. It's time to take the full cycle of the last 30 years of experience and learning and lessons that you've learned, and now you need to mature them into the next phase. It could feel almost like a Saturn return in that moment because you're being confronted with not just who you are, but the person that you're ready to step into. It's like a whole new version of you wants to come into fruition with this Saturn and Aries. And that means that you get to do the Saturn work of saying, okay, and how do I show that through action and integrity? This is about learning how to trust yourself. I think Saturn and Aries in your first is going to be this opportunity by the end for you to say, I know who I am and I can trust myself. I know how to make decisions that I can trust. I know how to follow my instincts with that Aries first house. And I know how to lead and pioneer others, how to move forward with clarity and inspiration. So I'm excited for Aries rising.
I'm so excited for Aries risings, also because Saturn will be moving out of its joy, the 12th house, which is one of the heavier transits. When I see clients with the 12th house Saturn transit, it can be really difficult because it is just this like heaviness, this fear, and it's sort of an implied heaviness and an implied fear. It's rarely an explicit one. So, Saturn coming into your first house, it's going to do you the favor of making what you have been going through for the past 3 years explicit, which doesn't make it easier to endure, but it does make it easier to address and to engage with and to actually grapple with, to use the language of an Aries rising. So I'm with Sarah. I think this is going to be an incredible transit for you. An important thing to consider is that Jupiter is coming from your fourth into your fifth. So there are themes of family that are going to be coming up and that are going to be helping you, buoying you, and supporting this deep Saturnian evolution that you are going through right now. And that's it. That is Sarah and I's speed round horoscopes for Saturn and Aries. Now, we had a limited amount of time today and we kind of just wanted to pop this off. But if you guys want more of our delicious thoughts on Saturn and Aries, like tenfold more, what these were like 90-second horoscopes, and we did like a 90-minute webinar with 30 minutes of Q&A. So if you want a lot more material and information about this 3-year transit and what it means for you and how to figure it out yourself deeply through all kinds of symbols and art and archetypes and myths and personal Saturn transit ideas, we also have a Saturn transit list as well as a media list for suggested watching and viewing. You can find all of that at the link in my description at Sarah's website. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah, and I'll see you before 3 years. So have a good week.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Hopefully, we get to do more of this soon. Thank you, Alexandra, and I will see you again soon.